Hello and welcome to the Round Ball Australia podcast. My name is Lachie Avil. Joining me today, the transfer window, Jacob Stevens, is open. Here comes the silliness.
Yeah, if it wasn't silly enough already, this is now just going to compound that, and these signings are going to, in some cases, materialise, and others prove to have never been more than rumours. But it's that time of the year where we all get excited thinking X club is going to sign Y player and it's going to win them the title, and then it either does or doesn't happen, and we all look silly at the end of it. But yeah, it makes for an exciting time.
It does. Now, this episode really, when we're planning it out, we kind of try and look forward a couple of weeks ahead for our podcasts and try to figure out what we're going to be talking about at certain times. This was all supposed to be about the transfer window and the players going back and forth between clubs, but Jacob, unfortunately, another stark reminder of the situation that we find ourselves in with the A-Leagues at the moment. Firstly, which is an unfortunate thing to say, we have the situation with the Central Coast Mariners. So just to give you the lowdown and catch everyone up on where this is at, news first broke on Monday that the APL were taking control of the club after Mike Charlesworth forfeited his club participation agreement whilst engaging in a new sales process. So we understand, Jacob, that the Mariners and Charlesworth specifically has been open about the fact that he's been trying to sell the club for a little while now. We thought we had, the Sydney Morning Herald was reporting that QPR were really, really close to finalising a purchase before that fell through. And now we have Damon Hanlon, who is as we said many times now, the former president of Sydney Olympic, who was pumping money into the club. An agreement also fell through with him at the 11th hour. So the APL have come in and said enough's enough. Charlesworth has handed back his licence. The APL have terminated his CPA and taken over operational control of the club to find them a new owner.
Yeah, getting a bit of the Jets treatment, but I get the feeling that the APL will have learned from that saga and will realise that this can only be a short-term thing. I don't think they can feasibly, like they did with the Jets, sustain this club for numerous seasons moving forwards in the hope that something comes along. It's going to be very much a short-term scenario of try and get them through this season and hope something can probably materialise in the off-season in terms of an ownership bid or some sort of investment coming into the club. Because it just, with the finances as they are already in the league, it just doesn't seem reasonable to continue to try and hold up a club perhaps at the detriment to others, right? So it's a difficult situation because we don't want clubs to fold, and especially a foundation club like the Mariners obviously have been here since the start. They've had their on-field successes obviously very recently, winning the treble, which was just an incredible achievement for any A-League side, leave alone one of the smaller sides like the Mariners. So their on-field merits show that they're more than worthy of being here. It's just, again, it's that financial side of things. It's what doomed Western United, and just like a week or so after we get some good news about them, we then get this news about the Mariners, and it kind of brings everyone's spirits back down again, that almost every club in the league is kind of on these tenterhooks, right, where it's one small thing and all of a sudden their prospects aren't looking so good. I mean, we saw Melbourne Victory release some of their figures in a financial report as well. I think it was a $5.5 million operating loss or something, right? Which, that sounds bad. It's actually an improvement on previous years, so it's trending upwards for the Victory, but it's still, that's a big loss to take for a sporting club. And it just I think really rams home that this could happen to anyone at any time in this league. It really is still quite a dangerous kind of financial game to be playing. But that's the unfortunate reality, right? And it's just something that's got to keep pushing forward. So fingers crossed that this, is just a short-term thing, that the APL can take over control and guide the Mariners through the rest of the season and get them the best opportunity to kind of recover and find a new owner and get some investment in.
Yeah, so there are more specifics around the Mariners, which we will touch on, but you bring up a very important point, which I think needs to be discussed, which is the support of the APL. Now, I think when they came out with this statement on Monday, it was somewhat ambiguous as to what level of support they were providing. But Football 360 are reporting in one of their pieces, quote, "Meanwhile, the APL has taken on the payment of player wages to ensure the continuity of the on-field participation and has set up the required new company to manage the club for as long as is required." Now, I'm really torn here, Jacob, because we've been down this road before many times. And if there is any level of even insignificant financial support, that support is always multiplied by time,
Yeah.
right? So we've seen the Newcastle Jets, we've seen Perth Glory, we've seen Canberra United.
Mm-hmm.
Newcastle Jets, when that all started, it was in a position where the four or five clubs that were supporting them, they were in a financial position to do that comfortably. But by the time we get around to Perth and Canberra, well, the league went, actually, no, we're not going to come and save you. We can't afford to. This is your problem. You got to figure it out. And refused to guarantee the safety of a Canberra United in the A-League Women's. And all of a sudden we're coming to the Mariners, and sure, there's interest, locally. Hanlon can still be involved in this process. Apparently there's another domestic consortium involved. There's QPR and at least two other international European clubs that are interested as well, according to these reports. But it feels like we've had that optimism before about the Jets. It was supposed to be a small term fix, but it just grew bigger and bigger. And my impression, I know the APL are under new leadership now with Steve Rosic, but my impression was that the league wasn't going to come in and bail these clubs out anymore. So I'm a little bit worried about the precedent we're setting here.
Yeah, it's definitely worrying, and the comparison to the Jets is, how many times with them were we going, this is the one. They finally got the bid in. It's going to be this time, and then again it falls apart. A bit like it's happened twice now with the Mariners, or supposedly twice now with Hanlon and QPR.
And don't forget with Perth, we actually had an announced owner, and it still fell through.
It still fell through. Same thing happened with Western United as well. So it's just, we've seen this play out so many times, and that's why I think the APL are kind of in this position of like very limited involvement. I suppose they're doing kind of what they have to for the short term, but yeah, I think they kind of realize, like you said, any investment you put in just multiplies with time the longer that they stick around not having an owner, and it just becomes more of a burden. And I think the APL realize they realistically can't afford to do that, so it's dangerous. Like you said, I think it is dangerous for sure. And not being able to support these clubs when these kind of things happens, it sucks. But it's also, that's just the reality of the game here, unfortunately. We'd all love for the clubs to all be financially stable and fine and for this to never happen, but that's not the case. We're always moaning about there not being enough money in football, and this is another reminder of that. So yeah, I mean, like, I can't hate on the APL for kind of being a little bit, not non-committal, but you know what I mean? Like they're not looking at this as any kind of long-term thing. I can't really blame them for that, because it just doesn't make sense any way that you look at it. Like you said, when it happened with the Jets, a lot of clubs were in a decent position, and then obviously a lot of stuff has happened kind of since then to make money a bit tighter for most of the clubs in the league, and it becomes less feasible. It's even less feasible for clubs to be propping each other up now.
Yeah, 100%. So that was really step one on Monday, the APL stepping in and saying this sale hasn't happened, Charlesworth is giving back the license, and we're going to step in and pay the bills and keep them ticking over. So what that means is that the players will keep playing games of football, and hopefully the on-field is unaffected, at least in the short term. The longer term, or even in the medium term for the rest of the season, right, Jacob?
Yeah.
Is that this, according to Football 360, has cost them a bunch of transfers as well. That is something that immediately as this happens is now taken off the table. So they were reporting that Nick D'Agostino, who we'll talk again about a little bit later, was very, very close, as well as Jacob Farrell, in deep negotiations to come to the club on a 6-month loan deal, and also permanent moves for Adelaide United's Ben Falami and Japanese striker Kato Taniguchi as well. So all of a sudden, all of the recruits, not all the recruits to be fair, we've actually seen obviously Ali Orgler and Ollie Laval be confirmed already by the club. But some of these more ambitious signings that could have really turned the tables for them in the back end of the season, they're just not going to happen anymore.
Yeah, and signings that Warren Moon was super excited about only a couple of weeks ago after he beat Adelaide 4-0 at home. He was talking up how, there's going to be investment in the squad, and they're looking to bring in a lot of talent in January, and now this happens and a lot of those targets aren't able to come, and it's disappointing for the club, obviously, not being able to make those signings and really bolster their squad and help them kind of stave off being one of the bottom 2-3 kind of sides as they look to be kind of solidifying their spot 4 now. But it's also, it sucks for the players, right? And this is, again, we'll get into this in the transfer window segment, but it's a World Cup year. Players are looking to kind of get themselves back in that Socceroos picture and in that discussion to make the World Cup squad in whatever capacity. And that's just taking another option off the table, right? They're not going to be able to have that opportunity to head to the Mariners. So it's just, yeah, on a number of different levels and from a bunch of different perspectives, it really is just, it's a bit of a shame. And, it's going to be the Mariners again kind of working with what they've already got and just trying to hope and pray for the best, I suppose, moving forwards.
Yep, absolutely. So part 2 on Tuesday night, there was a bit of a storm on social media. There were some documents that got sent around that essentially revealed the liquidation of a company called the Central Coast Mariners Foundation Limited, which trades publicly as the Central Coast Mariners Academy. And that was being put into liquidation is obviously setting off some alarm bells saying, okay, is the academy closing down? All the kids that are registered, all the parents that have paid all the money for these kids to play in 2026, what is happening to that organization? From what we understand, and this is Football 360's report as well, is that Foundation Limited company is simply the entity that Charlesworth used to hold the license.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's still a lot of murky water here and there's a lot to figure out, but that is part of the technical process that is required to transfer the operations of the club to the APL. So there is obviously a lack of certainty around all of the club operations, including the academy, but this specific process, Jacob, does not necessarily mean that the academy is going away or shutting down.
Yeah, exactly. It's just one of those legal technicalities of, I mean, you see it with all sporting clubs, all businesses, basically. It's split up into a bunch of different names and they each hold different things and it's all to spread out liability and stuff like that. And like you said, in this case, it's more of kind of just a prerequisite of being able to hand control over to the APL a little bit more and give them a little bit more of that operational control and formalising that. It shouldn't have too much of an impact, fingers crossed, on the actual operations of those academy sides themselves. Because like you said, there's people have paid good money to be involved in that, and it's been a key part of the Mariners' success as well. Let's not forget, has been how well they've been able to work a lot of those grassroots level stuff and bring up their own products through their academy system. So it's when you just read it and you see that the academy has been liquidated, it's obviously, it does set off those alarm bells. It doesn't look great. It makes for an easy quick headline, but I think as that report really states, it's more of just a technicality than anything. It shouldn't hopefully be too big of a problem. Obviously the greater problem is that the Mariners are under APL's control. It's the academy just happens to be bundled in with that.
Yep. So there you go. We're up to date on the Mariners now, and that's the situation as we know it. It is a worrying one, of course. We saw, I think it was Joey Lynch was first to this as well, that the APL were not of the mind to entertain offers from anyone that would move the Central Coast Mariners away from Gosford as a franchise, which surely it is a given, right? That place and its picturesque nature and its beauty really is a location. And
it's got football. A good stadium, and it's got it just it would be silly to move
the stadium. Yeah, what are you going to do? Put the sauce bottles on a end with the stands?
It doesn't work.
So it doesn't work. The Mariners belong in Gosford. We saw those scenes of the grand final a couple of years ago. They're a remarkable club. They won a treble 2 seasons ago. It's honestly quite bewildering that we've gotten to this point, but that is just where we're at. And they're a foundation club, Jacob. We don't want them to go away. And that's why it's conflicting, because we want the White Knight to come in. We want the APL in some respect to come and save them and make sure they don't go under. But it's so worrying. There's dangerous precedents everywhere. Hopefully what the dream scenario is that this is a 2 or 3 month process. A buyer is identified, the transaction is completed, and before the end of the season, this is all sorted out.
That would be ideal, wouldn't it? But let's wait and see. Nothing's ever a given in the A-League, unfortunately, especially in this kind of scenario. And like I said, we all want it to be perfect, and we want somebody to come swooping in right now and solve all these problems. But that's just realistically, it's not going to happen. There's going to be a process attached to it. So we're just going to have to wait and see and hope for the best for the Mariners.
All right, count number 2, Adelaide United and Josh Cavallo. This controversy started on Tuesday morning when Josh, who is now living over in the UK, playing football in the 6th tier of the English pyramid, came out and had a very strongly worded Instagram post that laid some pretty heavy accusations at the Adelaide United Football Club. Now, Cavallo, as I'm sure most people are aware, about 5 years ago, became the first active men's professional footballer to come out as gay. And in this post, he alleged that Adelaide United was a homophobic football club and, quote, leaving the club had nothing to do with football. Decisions were made by people in power that blocked my opportunities, not because of my talent, but because of who I choose to love. That post currently has a little over 200,000 likes on Instagram. That was met with strong denial from many parties at Adelaide United. The club, quote, categorically denies the accusations. John Cosmina spoke at a conference on Wednesday.
Nathan Cosmina.
Sorry, Nathan Cosmina. There's so many Cosminas
there
in
is
Adelaide.
a few of them, yeah.
Nathan Cosmina spoke on Wednesday saying that Cavallo never raised the issue with anyone while he was at the club, and the accusations, quote, aren't true and factual based on the information we have at hand. And the blanket nature, I think, around the playing group and everything else, it has kind of tarnished a lot of people past and present involved with the club. Former assistant Travis Dodd, who was on the wrong side of Adelaide United's management civil war last season as well, was interviewed by Channel 7. He denied that Cavallo's sexuality was ever brought up when making football decisions and said he was disappointed with the generalisation of Josh's accusations. So this is obviously a very delicate issue, Jacob. I don't think it's any surprise that this has come to a head the week of Adelaide's and Melbourne Victory's Pride Cup game as well in the original rivalry on Saturday evening. It's clearly an issue that needs a whole lot more thought and discussion in Australian football. But Josh's accusations are very serious to the point where, action one way or the other definitely has to be taken.
Yes, it's a difficult one to kind of navigate. There's, kind of in my mind, the way that Josh worded his statement on Instagram, it seems like there's almost kind of he's leveling two allegations in a way. One, that there's some kind of systemic homophobia within Adelaide United that denied him opportunities to play and things of that nature. And then there's the separate one of that his teammates were being directly homophobic towards him and his partner. So there's kind of these two levels to it, which are very, very serious allegations and should be treated as such. But it is also the problem being that it's so easy to say, well, yes, but it's just because you weren't good enough, so that's why you weren't in the team and things like that. So there's so many different angles at which to come with this, but I think it's always important to remember that more than one thing can be true at a time.
Yes.
The fact that maybe he wasn't up to the standard that the club wanted is not mutually exclusive with the fact that he experienced potentially homophobia, right? Like they can coexist, and I think that's kind of the nuance that is lacking a lot in at least the discussion that I've seen, particularly on social media. It's very firmly one way or the other with a lot of people, and there's not a lot of room to kind of go, actually both of these things can be true at the same time. Obviously I don't think we'll ever know fully exactly what happened here, and that's the problem with these kind of things is that's just the way it works. The proof is very difficult to actually find and ascertain any evidence and things like that. These kind of allegations, of course the club is going to deny it. They're not going to come out and say, yes, we're a homophobic football club, especially not after the work that they have done with things like the Pride Cup initiative with Melbourne Victory and in supporting Josh as well when he first came out. And that was something that Nathan Cosmina touched on in his statement to the media, was that actually Josh spoke very highly of the club, during that period of time when he came out. And even I believe when he got engaged to his partner as well, it took place at Cooper's Stadium, and the club was very supportive of him at that point in time. But the thing that really sticks with me, it's two words that Josh put in his statement, which was new management, and that seems to suggest that there was some kind of structural change that happened at the club, and that caused some of these issues to arise, or for Josh to at least feel like that is what happened, and that's what denied him these opportunities. So yeah, there's so many inner workings. I mean, you mentioned the kind of coaching civil war, right? Last season, we still don't know exactly what happened there and how it all went down. Still, a lot of it is just kind of in the dark, and it will be the same with this. I think that there's a couple of things as well I want to touch on. People saying, oh well, surely Josh should just name names, and then and then an investigation can happen, and it's all well and good to say that, but then you'll open yourself up to defamation issues if you say that. And
has he not already, with the severity of his accusations?
Well, that's the thing. I believe the club potentially could. I'd have to go back and reread like my criminal law textbooks or something, but to try and find out. But no, it's definitely, the statements are very strong, and it's such a departure. This is the thing; it's such a departure from everything he has said about the club up until this point, which was that they had been supportive and that they had been, an environment in which he actually was able to be himself publicly for the first time in his footballing career. And now there's a massive departure from that, where he feels it's actually the opposite, and that's what's caused him to leave the club. Whether the club could pursue it or not, I don't know. Potentially. I think the fact that he hasn't named names, it removes that level of individual liability from it. So the club would have to prove that it had tarnished their reputation. How they'd quantify that, I'm not 100% certain, because it's, they can't say it's, a loss of earnings or anything like that. They've just sold out for the original rivalry this weekend. So the fans are still around the club. It's just, it's a very dangerous game to be playing, which kind of lends credence to perhaps at least something within these statements being true from Josh. Obviously, like I said, we can't know, we don't know, and we probably never will know for sure. But to come out and say this, it's a very strong statement, making some very strong allegations that, it does open you up to those kind of legal issues if it's not founded. So there is every potential that something within this here, there's a thread of truth to it.
Yes, it's obviously a very delicate situation. You talked about the phrase new management. Obviously, there is one name that's going to jump to people's minds. I think it is, number one, important to stress that that person is not the only one, and we're not going to name them because this is, as we say, a very delicate situation. There is many people that joined Adelaide United during that window that Josh is talking about. That is important to stress. And you were very right in your point that many things can be true at once. It is not this or this. It is potentially this and this and this and this. And many things can be true. Was Josh a regular A-League level footballer? I think the consensus is probably not. Does that mean he wasn't shared out of the team for political reasons? Not necessarily. Were there moments of homophobic abuse? Obviously, on social media, ever since he came out, absolutely.
Even at games from spectators, right? So
100%. Has that made its way into the dressing room at points? We don't know. Maybe not. And I think, unfortunately for Josh, because he's gone so nuclear with it, I look, again, I don't have any legal training or whatever. I'm definitely going to stress that. I think, Cosmina talks about it here. It has tarnished a lot of people, past and present, involved with the club. I think it's very easy to argue that he's caused reputational damage to Adelaide United. And so, from my one semester of law and ethics at university, would tell me that, defamation doesn't count as long as you can prove things that are true. I don't know, Jacob.
Yeah.
He doesn't lay any hard evidence there. Obviously, he talks about the group chat and the photo being, discussed or made fun of in any way. Another thing that can be true, do people in sports teams have banter about people and their partners of any sexuality, of any gender? Yes, that is also true. Is it usually worse in a homophobic nature sometimes of same-sex couples? Yes, that is also true. So there is a lot going on here. It's very, very delicate, and it's just another sucky situation for everyone to find themselves in. Again, on the eve of what is supposed to be not just a celebration of pride, but specifically, and this has been a turn in the last couple of years, really focusing on educating players and staff at clubs. At the end of the day, all the front-facing pride celebration stuff, all the color and the rainbows. Awareness is one part of it, but educating the players and them going out and professional athletes being the number one source of role models everywhere, them putting forward that behavior and then being copied by the people who look to them as their heroes, as their role models, is so important. So the timing of it is just really unfortunate as well.
Yeah, the timing, I'd hazard to say, was probably a choice, knowing that this was coming up and to try and highlight some form of hypocrisy. But to touch on that education element, I think that's incredibly important, and it's something that's been mentioned in probably 2 or 3, I think, of the statements that we've seen. I think it was in the PFA's statement, the Pride Cup themselves obviously mentioned it, and in Adelaide United's initial response to these allegations as well. They all mentioned, how much importance they've put into continuing to develop these education sessions along with pride celebrations every year, to just continue to break down those barriers, and the persistent problem of homophobia in sports, not just here in Australia but in professional sports. I think pretty much worldwide it's still at least in the male side of things. Obviously we've seen kind of a different thing in women's sport where it's been much more open and accepting, but in the men's side of things it's still very much like a taboo topic in a way, right? And it's still a big problem. So yeah, it is very important to continue to push this education. And a lot of people say, well, why do we need it? Well, this is why, right? Is so that we can avoid these kinds of situations, and so that we have players who are comfortable to be themselves, and so that we have players who are informed on things that it's not a life experience that they have. They don't understand it. They don't understand the perspective and how difficult it can be for people and things like that. And it's that kind of thing, like you said, when you've got eyes on you and you are a role model for other people, to be able to actually be a decent person. It's taken for granted a lot of the time, and there's work that needs to be done to get everybody to that level. And I think that it's great that this has been this kind of shift towards actual meaningful purpose behind these Pride Cup games and kind of this Pride celebration. Is it's not just all showy and oh, look at this, we've got rainbows, how awesome, everybody's included. It's actually meaningfully implementing something to try and make that actionable, and I think that's really great to see. And I think everybody pretty much would agree with that actually having something there that's meaningful and that can be implemented is really important in this. So yeah, it's a sucky situation, it really is, and the timing sucks. The whole thing does, to be honest, and it does just really highlight that there is still a lot of work to be done on this topic, and it will take probably a long time still, but it needs to be started, and it needs to continue. And so it's good to see that has been the case, at least over the last couple of years with the Pride Cup.
Okay, now obviously these two conversations are obviously focused around some of the problems of the league, but don't let people fool you. There is not only negatives to be talking about. There is a lot going right with the A-League. And one thing we saw today come out is the PFA releasing their report. They're calling it Ready for Takeoff, proposing their vision for the future of the A-League women's and being optimistic and, having a vision for the future of what the potential of this competition can be. And if you want a full deep dive, Paletti was at the event today. There will be a Dubcast episode releasing on Friday, going through the whole nuts and bolts with interviews from Bo Bush, the CEO of the PFA, and 2 players as well on the women's side of the league. But the crucial recommendation here, and it's not going to be a surprise to anyone, Jacob, is that the women, the players from the PFA, want full-time professionalism, 12-month contracts in the A-League women, and they want it by next season. And now the next question is, how much does this cost? The PFA have presented a business case that suggests it is $1 million extra per club. Now, obviously, does every club have that much money to spend right now? No. The other thing is there is a new broadcast deal being negotiated for next season. Yeah. So the finance discussion will be had, but the cold hard facts of the matter is that the A-League was once, or the W League as it was then called, was once a destination football league around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it still holds that reputation in Asia. It still is that place to be in Asia, but it has fallen behind significantly in terms of worldwide women's football. And when we consider ourselves as Australians and the pride that we have with sport in Australia and the strides that we've made in other women's codes around the country, it is really disappointing the place that we're at the moment with women's football. And hopefully with, Steve Rosic at the APL now, who's just settling into his job, we know. But this is another opportunity for them to really launch a platform for a new era for women's football and actually capitalize on what's going to happen in a little under 2 months when the Women's Asian Cup kicks off in Australia.
Yeah, and we've seen overseas how little it takes for it to really catch and just go big. It's been a rapid rise of women's football around the world recently. And obviously, I think, kind of the World Cup, the Olympics has always been that. And the international side of the game has always been very strong. But, in terms of domestic leagues, you're not seeing the same kind of breadth as you did with, men's football. But in recent years, there has been a big push to kind of bring that gap closer, right? And to, now you're seeing a lot of European clubs pumping a lot of money into their women's teams. You're seeing record transfer fees being broken and Australia being left behind in a way and not being able to capitalize on the goodwill that they did have with the W League. Like you said, Lachie, it was the destination league. The big names were playing here, that will then go on and play for the Matildas and play for their international teams. And it just, that's still the case, yeah, to a degree, but nowhere near to the extent that it was, and it really has fallen behind the rest of the world. So it's incredibly frustrating, I think, to see this, because we just know the pulling power that the game can have and that the women's game can have. I mean, we saw the World Cup on home soil. We've got the Asian Cup on home soil coming up this year as well. It just brings people together. They love it. It's great fun. It's the quality of football is incredible. Like it just feels like all the pieces are there and they're just not being brought together. And like you said, not all the clubs have the money to kind of do that. And that's always been, at least recently in the last few years, has been the primary discourse, is that, well, clubs just don't have the money to do it, right? They've got to kind of figure out which way they kind of want to prioritize things. Is it the men's side of the game? Is it the women's side of the game? But it just, like I said, it doesn't take much to really just get it going and for it to catch and to kind of bloom into something really special. And I think that's kind of the position that the PFA is taking as well, right? It's that it's only $1 million extra a year. It's, for full-time professionalism. It's crazy that it's not already a fully professional league. And, it's just like these little things that happen. All of a sudden, the players are full-time professionals. They can give more to the game. They can improve themselves and the standard, and they can keep, continuing to develop as players, raise the standard of football. The league gets better. You're attracting, more attention with, then you've got these opportunities to bounce it off of these big major international tournaments that you're hosting and things like that. And it all just it just takes one thing for it to really just push it in the right direction. So, hopefully this can help. Obviously, the PFA are going to want to say all this stuff. They're going to want to say, yeah, we want it to be huge. We want to have this and that and the other. But I think they've actually been incredibly realistic as well. That's the thing, is they've gone, this is actually something that we can achieve and that we believe can be achieved. And like you said, with a new broadcast deal being negotiated, the end of this year, end of the season or whatever?
It runs out at the end of this season.
Yeah, end of the season. So it's literally right around the corner. That's that opportunity to really go, well, we actually know what we're aiming for. We've got these goals set in place, and it just makes, from that perspective, a lot easier to negotiate, knowing what you want to get out of it, so that kind of your starting figure in a way, right? We have to get this to be able to meet our goals. So whether or not they get that is another question entirely, but I think it's doable. I really hope it is, at the very least, because otherwise what we're going to see is just continually the top talent here starting to drain away earlier and earlier, and not have that opportunity to build those names in front of the home crowds before they then go on and do bigger and better things. Obviously the big example is Sam Kerr, right? Dominating the W League back in the day, and then gets a big move and becomes the Matildas star, and that's the kind of thing we want to see, and that's the position that the league used to be in. But now it's going to start to become a case where talent moves elsewhere because the opportunities are better. They can't sustain themselves here. They have to work an extra job to be able to actually afford to live. And it just doesn't become feasible for the players themselves. So yeah, it's a shame that women's football is at where it's at domestically in this country, because at the top level it's incredibly strong for Australia, and we've all seen that. So the fact that it's not been able to kind of flow on from that is very disappointing.
Yeah, and the $1 million mark, obviously it sounds like a lot in the context of clubs are falling apart and losing money, but it's also not too much in terms of, total spend on a men's program every year. But this is the most value for money that you will ever spend in the women's football
100%.
ever again.
Yeah.
The getting to the floor of full-time professionalism where players are at their clubs year round. They don't have to work second jobs. Football is their pure focus and they have solid employment. The value that you get from that is just going to be completely exponential compared to a 10% increase in the salary cap down the road, right? Like that's not changing people's lives. This is changing people's lives. So look, it's never easy. The money has to be taken from somewhere and we understand those realities, but this is the time. You've got to lay the platform, allow full-time professionalism to set the platform for future growth, and just let these ladies just play football. Let them play football, let them learn, let them develop further. You'll get some transfer fees for them. We've already seen that starting in the last few years. This is the moment.
And that's the big thing, right, as well.
Moment.
That's the other side of it, is on the men's side of things, that's becoming now, okay, the way to be a profitable football club in Australia is to develop these players and sell them on. But if these players aren't professional, you're not giving them the best opportunity to develop and you're not maximising kind of that sell-on potential, right? And it kind of goes both ways. You have to put a bit of money in to actually get that money out again later on and to improve your chances of having those transfer fees that can help boost your club. So yeah,
absolutely. All right, and again, another plug: Dubcast on Friday with Paletti and Burke. Full rundown on all the events of Wednesday's event with the PFA launching this plan. Let's jump in. It is the first episode that we've done, Jacob, with the transfer window open. We do love these ones, don't we? Jumping through and
good fun.
Trying to have a guesses at how the different transfers will affect different teams. And I have to say, the first name on the list today, I'm a little bit sad about. I won't lie. It was officially confirmed just before we started recording that Ryan Teague is returning to Melbourne, but not at the club where he played 2 grand finals over the last 2 seasons. It's Melbourne City rather than Melbourne Victory. He's there on a 6-month loan from KV Michelin in Belgium. This is going to be a common theme that we see this window, Jacob. This feels like a pure World Cup play to me.
100%. Yeah, he's kind of on the periphery. I don't know where we have him in our tier list in terms of where we think he kind of ranks in the hierarchy
or something.
Yeah, quite potentially. So he needs to do a little bit of work to bump up our depth chart. That's for sure, and it'll probably be the case with the actual national team setup as well. So yeah, I think you're right. We'll see a lot of these kind of moves, whether it's to the A-League or from the A-League to try and get an opportunity. We heard kind of rumblings about potentially that was going to happen with Craig Goodwin, right? Heading off to, I think it was Indonesia, and to give him an opportunity to play in his position again and stuff like that. And he came out and said, no, that's rubbish. That's not going to happen. But
he's staying forever.
But those are the kinds of moves that we can expect to see, I think, with those players that are on the Socceroos radar for this World Cup, it being a World Cup year. January is not typically a time of the year that A-League clubs tend to make many moves. It's usually quite quiet. Maybe there's a mutual termination here and there and another club picks them up, but in terms of big moves like this, it doesn't happen very frequently in January. So it's a World Cup year. There's going to be a lot of players that are trying to make themselves available so that they're getting opportunities to get eyeballs on them with the hopes of making it to the World Cup. Ryan Teague being one of them. Obviously the whole circumstances around him is from a Victory fan perspective incredibly disappointing, because he leaves for this opportunity and then 6 months later he's back on loan to your biggest rival. It stings. That sucks. Oh, well, if he was just going to come back on loan, why didn't he get a loan back to us? Why didn't he this, that, the other? And to that, it's kind of my thinking is, you're offering this kid a chance to go and play in Europe. And presumably are dangling a carrot there of you could have a starting spot. And, you know, he's going to take that, and he's not going to think about, well, what's my safety net? You know, do I need a loan back somewhere just for a year just to continue to develop, or do I chase this dream? And so that's kind of, you know, I can kind of sympathize with that perspective from the player, being like, he wants that. He wants to chase his dream in Europe, and he wants to go on and, you know, try and get that starting spot, and it didn't work out. But the, you know, good news is he has been able to get himself a loan move. Sucks for the Victory, sucks for their fans, but fatigue, I think it's huge, and for City it's massive as well. Obviously, their injury struggles over the last 2-3 seasons have been well documented, and you know, they're getting in a very high quality midfielder, and I think from a neutral's perspective as well, it's going to be great to see him back in the league. He was tremendous last season, one of the, if not the best midfielder in the central midfielder in the league last season. So to have him back, that's going to be a huge boost for City, who have kind of been flagging a little bit recently, not had great form, not had much control over games. I think he's the sort of player that could offer that for them. So it's a huge signing for them.
Absolutely. Going into the latter stages of the ACL Elite as well. Massive boost for City for their quest for continental success. It feels... Obviously, Victory fan here, right? I hate the fact that he signed for City, and a lot of Victory fans will feel the same way. But I think another reality that we have to kind of deal with a little bit is that maybe that feeling just isn't shared too much with some players, like especially like a Ryan Teague, right? Like he came through Sydney's academy and then went overseas and then came to the Victory for, what was it, 2 years, right? Yeah. It's not like and Nishan Velupillay, who's come through. We saw Razmovsky as well make his debut on the weekend for Victory, who's come all the way through the academy. Yeah. That's a slightly different story. You know, we've seen players go across the divide before. It's happened a lot in Sydney as well. This is kind of just what happens. And on the Teague specific transfer, I have empathy as well. You're talking about, you know, it did feel like the right time for him to go on. Like he bossed the league for 2 years in a row, really. Yeah. Like there was the time for him to make the step up. And I'm sure if he was starting at Michelin, he's almost a lock for the squad, for the World Cup squad. But that hasn't happened. Could there have been a situation where he says, okay, I've got my transfer, but maybe let's float the idea of, okay, I'm going to go on loan to Victory for 1 more year though. So I'm playing, I guarantee regular minutes. Popper's already picking me while I'm playing central midfield for the Victory. Maybe I could do that to lock up a World Cup spot and then move the year after. But he chose to take this gamble, and Victory just flat out don't have room for him. Yeah. There's no way they're going to play. Like even if they wanted to bring him in, you've got Dorigo. You're already struggling to find a spot for Jean Rowe as well. And these are contracted players that you hold the value to, not a loanee. So unfortunate for Victory, but that's the reality for Ryan Teague. I'm going to take my turn to try and hurt you in the feels a little bit. Zach Clough confirmed to the Newcastle Jets for 2.5 years. Adelaide United, famously, or infamously, with their number 1 ticket holder, Julian Cavallo, taking up that 5th visa spot. There's no available international player spaces for Adelaide at the moment, and we understand that Clough would have preferred to go to Adelaide if he could. But that's a big win for the Jets.
Yeah, that's the thing that softens the blow a little bit, I think, for Adelaide fans, is that Clough was quite clearly, he did want to return to Adelaide. And that was, you know, what I'd even heard from the club 10 days ago during the match against the Mariners was, you know, when these rumours first started to come out, he could be headed to the Jets. It was, yeah, he really wanted to come back, but there's no space for him because there's no visa spots open. Obviously, he's an Englishman. And it's, you know, the Jets have got a really quality player on their hands. I've seen a lot of criticism of Zach Clough over the years of, you know, he's kind of a passenger in games. He doesn't do this, he doesn't do that. But he's the kind of player that just some of the passes he makes are so brilliant. There's a good little clip that the Newcastle Jets put up of some of his top moments in the league, and just some of those through-ball passes, his ability in the half spaces, and I think one of his underrated attributes as well is his set pieces and crossing, which was always top-notch for Adelaide and brought the likes of Hiroshi Abasukian and later Archie Goodwin really into the game and into the goals. Those are just such pivotal things that the Jets, you know, having that kind of creative outlet is going to be just huge for them. Like, it's going to be a massive boost. And, you know, he's got the experience at this level. He's got the, you know, obviously experience with Mark Milligan as well, who he knows from his time at Adelaide. Like, it seems like a really, really good signing for him. A 2.5 year deal too. So, you know, I think he's 31?
30, I reckon. Yeah.
30. So, he's kind of, it's not like this is going to be his final deal either. It's a chance for him to continue on with his career. I thought in the last couple of seasons that Adelaide really started to hit his strides and was becoming one of the best number 10s in the league. So for the Jets to sign a player of that kind of quality, it's enormous for them in their season, where they've kind of been up and down, up and down. He could bring a bit of stability, hopefully, and when he's on, he can just control a game from start to finish. So yeah, it's a really, really good signing for the Jets, and a lot of Adelaide fans are very unhappy.
Yeah, it's not really a position that you'd say would be the Jets' first priority in terms of that attacking 10.
I think the thing that helps is that the Badalatu injury, like him going down, and now you've got somebody who's arguably better right now coming in as well, which is huge and softens the blow for the Jets with those injuries. So
sometimes I forget how well Badalado started the year as well. He was on fire.
He was leading the league in goals for a while because of that hat trick as well. Like was flying.
He was probably the first of the Socceroos bolters to be named coming out of the gates, and unfortunately with his ACL that's not going to happen. Want to talk a little bit about Brisbane Roar as well. Now, we tried to do this with the man himself, unfortunately. Kev Sangster, who's been part of our team for a little while, he's over in the UK at the moment having some internet issues. So we can't deliver this news to you firsthand as much as we tried. But he had a conversation with Zach Anderson, the COO at the Brisbane Roar, and had a chat about their transfer window plans for this January. And the focus was, Kev told us, definitely on attacking players. I think their goal record clearly shows the need for that. Nick D'Agostino is a name that's been rumoured with the Brisbane Roar. They weren't too committal, but definitely saying that's the kind of quality player that we would like. I think the fact that the Central Coast Mariners conversation has gone away for D'Agostino definitely lends towards the Roar potentially being in the front seat for a signing such as him. We saw that they've confirmed in the last 24 hours as well for Kranis has left the club as a defender. He came in as an American Australian, so he didn't count towards the visa.
No.
Yeah, and maybe he'd just be a good bit of value. It just seems like that experiment hasn't worked out. They don't always do, so I think that's fine. But the other thing Kev said is that the feeling is that they, even with Lucas Harrington leaving as well, they feel like they do have enough depth in their defensive stocks to keep on ticking. And the last point here as well, and we mentioned this with Teague, but D'Agostino is another classic example of that World Cup year signing. As you mentioned it, January is not usually a massive time for a lot of movement, but we're seeing a lot of Australian players potentially with that dream of a World Cup in mind, and D'Agostino is a perfect example. Come back, play another 6 months in the A-League, and come back and score a bunch of goals, and then suddenly you're in the frame again.
Yeah, and I think clubs are kind of realising that as well, right? They're positioning themselves to try and capitalise on that as best as they can. Obviously, we touched on the Mariners. They had plans to do that, and that's kind of fallen through for different reasons. We've seen City now go out, get Teague. Brisbane being kind of heavily linked as well with a number of players. So I think clubs are kind of realising this is a good opportunity to get a lot of value to help out this season. It's an easy sell to the players. Come to us, get a starting job, put your name in the hat for the Socceroos for the World Cup. It just kind of is falling very nicely for a lot of teams and a lot of players. So yeah, it's not overly surprising, and I do like that they were non-committal with regards to if they were actually after D'Agostino, but said that that's the kind of player they're looking for. And it's, well, how many players like D'Agostino are out there available at the moment? There's not a huge number.
There's only one D'Agostino.
He would be such a good signing for the Roar. Could you imagine? I mean, he was tremendous in his time at the Victory. Always hated as an Adelaide fan. Whenever he would be named on the team sheet, it just was like, he's going to have a game here, and he's just going to score a crazy goal or just absolutely dominate the game. And that's kind of what Brisbane are really in need of, is that they've just not been able to create much going forwards. And Vacan is saying he likes the depth that they do have defensively. I think that also the other side to that is that it's not necessarily the individuals that are giving Brisbane, this defensive record that they've had so far. It's been just their structure and how, well disciplined they've been as a team, and the way that they've set up and played. So I think that's the other benefit as well, right? Is that you've already got players who are kind of accustomed to this system waiting in the wings. Okay, they're not as experienced or as big named or whatever. And I think Kev was saying as well that Ben Warland's on his way back from an injury too. So that'll be a little bit of boost to the defensive stocks. But it's interesting to see that the clubs are going, well, actually, we've got an opportunity to kind of capitalize on market movements here and bring some players in, whether it's just for half a season on loan or if it's a bit of a more permanent deal in a way, and get them in for a season and a half or 2.5 seasons in Zach Clough's case, and try and turn our fortunes around, or in Brisbane's case, kind of continue to push on to be a title contender this season.
Right, and the good news story of the day, this one I'm loving, Jacob. Matt Sutton gets himself a 3-year deal, which I'm assuming is just the end of the 27-28 season. It'd be weird if it was 3 years from this window and he has to leave Perth halfway through a season, but that was the language in the release. Obviously, released from Western, didn't find a space for him anywhere, and then all of a sudden you've got injuries to Mark Birigidi and Cameron Cook in pre-season for the Glory. He gets signed on an injury replacement deal, which is now lapsed. Now the club have snapped him up after some really good performances. And I think it's a nice success story. It's a good pairing as well. Obviously, like Perth as a club, and then Sutton a bit down on their luck, and they've come together and had some success, and that's going to continue forwards for another, we think, 2.5 seasons.
Yeah, 2.5 seasons, maybe 3.5. I don't know. Could be. Could be that side of the spectrum as well. But no, this is awesome, because he was one of those players that I think a lot of people were feeling very bad for with the Western United kind of scenario, where he's a quality goalkeeper, and he showed that in his time at Western. And you're coming into this season unsure if you're even going to have a club. You get an opportunity, but you're kind of behind 2 others at Perth, and then all of a sudden they get the injuries and you show up and you just do your job, right? You play well, you're consistent, you show what you showed in your best moments at Western, and you get yourself a chance to kind of sit back a little bit and go, whew, all that stress over the last 8 months of uncertainty and not knowing what was going to happen, and knowing that you are, an A-League starting quality goalkeeper, but not necessarily being able to have that opportunity. All of that uncertainty's gone now, and he's got the backing of a club that seem to be on the up. Right, they've got a good thing going there at the moment. The fans are buying into the project. The players are buying into it. You've got a coach who's really passionate and just seems like a really, really cool guy to be around a lot of the time as well. So it would be such an awesome feeling for him. So he's gone from kind of one of the saddest stories of the off season, perhaps, to one of now the coolest little heartwarming stories of this January window so far, in that he's been able to secure his future, which is that's awesome to see.
100%. Some other little tidbits. There were some rumours going around that Victor Campuzano at Sydney FC had some offers from potentially back in Spain and also Poland. He said he's going to stay. It's only been a short time in Australia. He's got a 2-year deal at Sydney FC. He ain't going anywhere in this window, at least. Lucas Moragas could be another blow for the Central Coast Mariners. He's rumoured to be on the wish list of some lower league English clubs and some Scottish clubs as well. And the Wanderers have also confirmed the exit of Gabriel Cleur. But let's jump in to the weekend look. We're finally bringing the weekend look back because, games are actually being played on the weekend now, which is helpful for us, Jacob.
Yeah.
Who's it a big weekend for?
Oh, just about every single team in the league, I'd imagine, with how things have been going recently. No, I think, honestly, it's a big week for... I've got a couple of names floating around there, and they're both up the front for their respective sides, and it's Harry Sawyer and Lachie Rose.
Okay, pause. You go Harry Sawyer because I've got Lachie Rose covered.
I'll go Harry Sawyer. He's been pretty solid so far for MacArthur. He's not been lights out, scoring fistfuls of goals all season long, but not a single number 9 in the league has done that so far. He's done his job. He's won games for MacArthur when he's needed to. He's unfortunately didn't win that game against the Jets where he played extremely well, which is a bit of a shame, but he's looked quality. But now there is that threat looming of Mitchell Duke. He's right there in the shadows, and I believe he'll be available as well for this game. Whether or not he starts is a different question, but regardless, either way, it's going to be a huge weekend for Harry Sawyer, because he will probably feel like he might have done enough to have that starting spot. But when you've got that prospect of it being Mitchell Duke, Socceroos striker, he's proven himself at the A-League level with the Wanderers, that all of a sudden it's either going to give you a kick up the butt to keep pushing on and to get better, or it's going to kick you down a notch, right? And you're going to feel like, oh, the club don't trust me. So it's going to be about how he interprets that, and how he and Stayovsky have kind of worked on making sure that it's going to be a benefit for them and the club. So I think it's going to be a huge weekend for him.
100%. Even just to sweat on what Millet's going to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Am I starting or not? Have I earned his trust? Have I not? It's an interesting position.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is a big weekend for Lachie Rose, because individually he's just gone outright lead in the Golden Boot. There was a while there where there were like 7 or 8 players on 5 goals or something like that. And that was the marker for a while. Then Rose has come in, he's got himself to 6. So he is leading the Golden Boot for the season, which is exciting for him. It was a very crucial move moving to the Newcastle Jets at the start of last season. He kind of just wasn't that number one guy at MacArthur, and he has the potential to make himself that at the Newcastle Jets. And he's always played with effort. His intensity and his pressing has always been top notch, but he just hasn't always put the goals away. Yeah. So he's got a chance now against the Western Sydney Wanderers, who are not as bad of a defensive team as a lot of the other teams close to that end of the table. We saw what they could do against the Victory if they find themselves in the lead. So it's a massive chance for Rose to really, really prove himself. And a lot of the teams around the Jets have tough games as well. Brisbane have to travel to a barnstorming Perth. City have to play top of the table Auckland. They're the 2 teams directly below them. So, and then the next 2 are Melbourne Victory and Adelaide United, who are playing each other. So this is a good chance for the Jets to break away from that pack a little bit. And if they do, I think Lachie Rose is going to have to put his best foot forward. All right. In a dream world.
In a dream world. The Mariners. The Mariners get a result, and they are able to, not get rid of all the bad that's been around them over the last few days with all the, they've been handed over to the APL, but to just kind of rally around that, right, and not let it get them down too much. I think, seeing them playing some good football, getting a result, that would be awesome for them to kind of show that this isn't affecting the playing group as much as it would be. Absolutely, 100% it would be affecting them, to at least not show that that's the case, right? I just think that kind of show of strength, of unity, that would be really, really cool to see in the midst of everything that's going on for them. I think that would just be really nice.
I'll add to that as well, in a dream world, the fans show up for them as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, they've had poor crowds. They've dipped below 2,000 at one point. They got a great crowd on New Year's Eve, as they usually do. I just love a good show of support, saying it's not our fault.
Yeah.
We're here. We're supporting the team.
And to also just help that idea of we want to keep the team in Gosford, right? Like, show up and show why they should stay there,
Yeah, 100%. And I think, and there's a little bit of a dig at you, so I apologise. In a dream world, Julian Cavallo finally makes a matchday squad. He comes on for 3 minutes at the end of the game. He scores a goal and he says, Zach Clough, who? Who are we talking about?
Shows a proof of life
visa spot.
at this point.
Proof of life. Cavallo, I think he played 25 minutes or something in the cup, and that's all he's gotten. Imagine if he just scores a goal and puts his ear up saying, who's got that last visa spot? That would be amazing. That'd be a great storyline.
That would be funny.
Can't even handle it. All right. And finally, to finish us off, a worst case scenario.
We have an extremely boring Perth-Brisbane game, which results in 2 very boring press conferences from the most entertaining coaches in the league.
Oh,
that would suck.
That would be
We've all been looking forward to this. And if it's just a boring 0-0 draw where nothing happens and neither team plays very well, it won't be as good as if it's, you know, a crazy game with a ton that happened and, you know, maybe a weird decision here or there. You know, I think that would absolutely make it. So if it was just boring and both coaches didn't want to be there at the end, that would suck.
All right, that'll do for this episode of the Roundball Australia podcast. Jacob, thank you for your time today. Thank you, everyone at home. Enjoy your weekend of football. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.